Alright guys, we are back for part 3. This is going to be a shorter video. This is going to be just hooking up all the fluids, such as the transmission lines, the fuel lines, and the oil lines as well. So yeah, so where we left off was the engine was sitting in place with the wiring partially ran. I had some of the connectors hooked up, not all of them. I just started running it and routing it, just seeing where everything goes. But I started with the oil um, fittings. I tried using an oil pan, or I'm sorry, an oil filter adapter on the back of the oil pan, where traditionally it would be. But in my case, because I had the engine sitting so low in the subframe, it actually the oil filter would hit the subframe, so that wouldn't work out. So I had to run an external oil filter. I think it was like, I don't know, 20-30 bucks for the oil filter adapter to relocate it. And then I used some dash 10 oil lines that goes from the pan um, to the relocation kit. So on the pan, it just has two holes on it. Um, and what you do is you hook up an adapter that goes from the holes to the dash 10 fittings, which you can see right there. And then I wound up running the oil line fittings from there to the oil filter. But I ran into an issue, so I tried using 90-degree fittings, 45-degree fittings, straight fittings. I tried multiple different kind of fittings and adapters, and they weren't working out. And the best thing I could come up with was this. I did change this towards the end, which I didn't take any pictures of. Um, but right here you can see I have a 90-degree fitting. You'll see another picture. And this one right here is a straight fitting, which I changed to a 45-degree angle one. Um, Out towards this way, the way that the oil line is going out. But right now, I was running into the issue of that, so I actually wound up having to notch the subframe a little bit, just to get the oil line through there, and then I put some masking tape, or masking tape and cardboard around it, just so it didn't like rub through and cause an oil leak down the road. But yeah, I wound up changing that. I wound up running a 45-degree angle fitting instead, and it doesn't sit as low on the ground. I think it only comes down to like the bottom of the subframe now, so I don't have to worry about like bottoming out and uh, putting a hole through the oil line. And here's another angle. So you can see the 45-degree angle fits in here, or 90-degree angle. If I put another 90-degree angle in here, it would not work. I would have to be cutting the entire subframe out. So this is the only thing that would work for me. But like I said, I changed this straight fitting to a 45-degree angle, and it helped tremendously. Mind you, this is dash 10 hose, so it's not very flexible, but it's enough. So you can see the 45-degree angle, and it's because of how low the pan is, it's like only maybe an inch away from the subframe. So right here where it's circled is the oil filter relocation. I didn't take any pictures of this, unfortunately. This is the best picture I got, honestly. So as you can see, the oil lines are like over back here in the back left corner, or the back right corner of the engine, and they come around to this way, and they come up through the top here, over the top of the subframe, and then goes down into this oil filter relocation. So the oil filter is actually located in the front, and I know what some of you are probably saying is that, oh, I'm going to hit a rock, oh, it's going to put a hole through the oil filter, and then I'm going to have a leak and blow up my engine. Well, where I have it located, it's actually, the bumper is actually going to be covering it. So I'm not too worried about a rock going into it. It's actually sitting up high enough where even if a rock would get kicked up, it would just hit the bumper instead. It wouldn't come up and hit the oil pan, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, so I have, due to the fittings that I had left, I think I only used a 190-degree fitting here, and then I used a 45-degree fitting here. And these are dash 10 fittings. Going into, I think because of the oil filter relocation, I think it goes from like a 3/4 NPT to a dash 10 fitting. So it was a lot of fittings I had to order, but I got it to work out. So yeah. Here's another angle of where the oil filter is sitting. Obviously the coolant hose is sitting in the way, but that's where it sits, and these are where the fittings go. On the steering rack, actually I'm using the stock steering rack hose that went to the charger pump, and I just took it off the pump, off the charger. I took the line off the charger pump and I put it onto the Chevy pump, and it actually screws right into the Chevy pump, and it works perfectly fine. Didn't have to get any fittings or anything like that. But because of the pump on the 2.7 engine being up really high, the line is a lot longer. So I had to kind of bend this out of the way a little bit, bend the hose a little bit, but I made it work, and it actually works really good. So here's just a video of it cranking over. If you can see right here, I have a post. This post is actually hot. It runs from the batteries to this post, and this what feeds my. This is what the alternator is hooked up to. This is what my ECU is hooked up to. This is kind of like just like a hot wire to hook everything up to. Because as you know, on these chargers, they the battery is actually located in the trunk. So they run power wires up to the front of the car. So I have like a proper battery post right there that'll be covered later on. But yeah, so I just cranked it over, just trying to get the fluid circulating, get the air out of the oil filter lines and all that, just so when it does start up, I don't have to worry about like the bearings being starved for oil or anything like that. It actually took a good while of cranking over to get all the air out of the lines. It took probably about maybe like 3 minutes worth of cranking to get all the air out. So just check and make sure that you bleed that out before starting the car. This was just showing that the OBD was working. When I wired up the fuse box, it came with an OBD port that you can hook up to, and it actually works pretty good. So I think it's like only like 2 or 3 wires that you hook up, and that's it. So here's where it was sitting at. So I had the front support in. I had the oil lines hooked up. Nothing else was hooked up. I just had I had all the electrical connections hooked up, but I didn't have like the fuel or anything like that hooked up. I was just dry turning it over. I didn't want it to start up or anything like that. I wasn't ready for it. Next, I put on the radiator, and then right here is your power steering line cooler, and then this is an aftermarket transmission cooler that I put on here. I figured, keep the transmission as cool as possible to avoid it from any future damage or anything like that. Because the radiator on this is already pretty small enough, and I just wanted it to be able to cool off as best as possible. So far, I didn't have any issues with the stock radiator, but we'll have to see in the summertime and see how hot it really gets. But so far, it was staying cool in the wintertime. Yeah. And this is, if you can see here, so this is the front of the engine, and then this is the radiator with the fans. I took the fan So obviously in this car, I'm not using the mechanical fan anymore. I'm using the electric fans. So I took off the fan off the water pump right here, and it actually goes into the fan shroud just by a little bit, maybe about like a quarter inch or so. But the fan does not touch it at all in any way. And if over time it gets loose and starts wobbling, well, it'll just self clearance itself a little bit. But it works pretty good. It actually, surprisingly, there's enough airflow in there to actually keep the engine cool, um, at least driving around in the winter time. But we'll have to see in the summertime. Um, I hooked the brake lines back up again. They were sitting exposed out in the elements for a while, so the brake fluid actually got clogged up a little bit. It's starting to gel up, so I went up flushing everything out. I cleaned everything with brake clean, um, ran air through it, compressed air through it, and then I put brand new fluid in it and bled it all out, just so I don't have to worry about that down the road. And yeah. Here's another picture on the engine with like the clearance. It's, as you can see, it's really tight here, but still works. So I had the fuel lines hooked up. So what I'm using is a stock fuel line. So the stock fuel lines on these Chargers are 5/16, and on the Chevys they are 3/8. And on the Chargers they are returnless fuel systems. So there's only a supply line and that's it. There's no return line. But on the Chevys they needed a return line. So I wound up running a return line here on the bottom. That's the return line, and that is a 5/16 return line that goes back to the tank. I went up tapping a hole through the back of my tank and putting a fitting on the back of there. And I put a little bit of epoxy around it just to be safe. And so far, no leaks. But that is how I got it to work. Oh, and by the way, on the because the Chevys need a 3/8 fitting, I wound up having to cut back the fuel line and then adding a 5/16 fuel line hose to a 3/8 fitting right here, if you were wondering. So this is how you get to the fuel tank. So on these are really easy to get to. So you just pop the back seat off and you take off this cover right here, unplug it, and that's where the pump sits. Make sure when you're popping this cover off, or the little metal ring off the top here around these edges, they use a brass chisel and with a hammer, because if you use anything else, it'll wind up sparking and possibly even a fire. So make sure that you are extremely careful working around this stuff. So took the hat off and then I drained out all the gas out of here, so I can add my fitting. I don't think I had much where the fitting is, but this is what it looks like on the inside of the tank. So this is where the fuel filler neck is. So the gas comes in here when you're filling your gas tank, and this is where my fitting was for the return line. So fuel would go up to the fuel rail. It would come up here, go up into these fuel rails up here, and then once the pressure is reached the desired pressure, this little valve would open up and bleed off the excess pressure through this return line, and it would return back through here, back into the tank. So this is what the inside of the tank looks like. Don't mind this. I tried a different return setup and it was absolutely atrocious. I don't even need scolding on how atrocious this looks because I fixed this. What yours will look like is just a straight hose from here to here, and don't worry about this. Okay, so right here where this is circled is right where I tapped my fuel tank, and yeah, that was the only the flat spot, the best flat spot I could find that was easiest to get to. as well as it's away from any kind of damage from like road debris or anything like that. So this is what my fuse box looks like that I added. So I'm still using the stock Dodge fuse box to power everything in the car, like the brakes and the cluster, the anti-theft system, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm using this fuse box to power the engine, transmission, everything like that. Um, this fuse box is from BP Automotive. I think it's like $75 for like the basic one. It only comes with 2 relays for fuel, um, your fuel pump, and your ignition relay. And then you have fuses for everything else as well. And you just hook all those wires up to your harness. Um, it was a little bit of a learning curve trying to get everything wired up properly. But I ran into an issue of I was having no spark, and it turns out that the ECU needs 2 power wires, and I thought there was only 1 power wire to it. So I found out that there was actually a cut wire somewhere, and it was only getting power to one side of the ECU and not the other side. So make sure you have both of your power sucked up for that. Here's the front side of the engine. This is what I used for a temporary filter as well as like mounting the mass airflow sensor and all that kind of stuff. So I wound up cutting the old intake tube and just using this and clamped it onto the mass airflow sensor. Right now I don't have a filter on it, and it's really bad to run these without a filter because you're getting particles into your engine that you don't want, and 2, it'll wind up killing these mass airflow sensors a lot faster. But for now, I'm just running this in the meantime. And here's another angle of it. You can see right here how much clearance is with the fans and the serpentine belt and all that kind of stuff. Here's the heater core lines hooked up. So the heater core lines aren't different. I believe one side's like 5. I don't know, 5. No, it's not 5/16. I'm sorry. I think it's like 3/4 and some other size. It's like a smaller size. But yeah. And yeah, so I had that running up to my heater core lines. And then there's on the heater core lines, there's a T. I don't know if you can see that T right up here. And that T goes to the top of my my coolant box, which you'll see later. So you can see from the T, it comes around up to the top of my reservoir tank here. And then I have the bottom side of the tank actually running to the I think that runs to the bottom of the radiator. I think that's what I did. Yeah, I think I ran it to the bottom of the radiator. I'll have to get back to you guys on that one. I forget what I did with that one. But this one, so on these engines, they have coolant running through the throttle bodies to keep them from sticking from ice in the wintertime. So I actually have the coolant line running from that throttle body up here and to the top into here. And so far that has actually worked. I haven't had any issues with that so far. Oh, I think I figured it out now. Okay, so you see this tube here on the side? So actually this is running to the top of this cap, and I wound up running this tube, this little tiny tube that comes from the throttle body down to the bottom of this reservoir. That was the only way I was able to get the coolant system to work properly. And yeah. So that is it for this video. The next video is getting the drive shaft together, buttoning everything else up. You can see the ECU is just sitting here for now. It's still sitting in here just loosely. but I wound up putting conduit around all the wires, cleaning most of the stuff up except right here, just for um, troubleshooting purposes, just in case I still run into any issues. But yeah, so stay tuned for part 4.